Welcome to Encouragement for Living Life with Lockwood and Lockwood. The guys are here to encourage you in your attempt to live more confidently and successfully in our world. They are highly trained and experienced mental health professionals, but they are not your mental health professional. They are sharing encouragement through information and discussion. People are complex. Just because an idea helps one person doesn't mean it will help someone else. You need to consult with your own professional who will hopefully know what is best for you in your situation. Now, it's time for Lockwood and Lockwood.
The title of this podcast, folks, is The Types of Attachment and How to Develop Security in a Child. And that's assuming, by the way, once you have a secure child, the child turns into a secure adult, young adult and adult. You know, and the more secure a person is, the easier they can deal with the ups and downs of life. Conflicts, feelings, change, which is really hard for people not real secure. Security makes everything easier and more comfortable for a person in this world. So we want to start out with, there's 4 different general types of attachment that all the research is done on, and it's staggering fact, and it's still around this from what I researched. They say 50 to 65% of attachments are secure. Well, that's a big variation depending on what study we're talking about. But in the old days, it used to be about 55 were secure, 45% were not secure. Well, if you think about it, that's a ton of people. Now, that doesn't mean that they have diagnoses or have significant problems, but that's a lot of people that never formed a secure attachment. And it certainly doesn't make life easier for them, makes it more difficult for them generally. Not all people, but generally it does. Mm-hmm. So I thought we'd go through the 4 different types. We'll obviously focus on how to form a secure attachment, but let's start with a secure attachment. Usually it means more trust, positive outlook, stable, and they have empathy. They're more stable and they have empathy. They're more able to be empathic with people. And there's much more to it, but we'll get into that. But the next type of attachment is the anxious, preoccupied attachment. Some characteristics of that are often fear of abandonment, insecure in relationships, clingy, tendency to need a lot of reassurance, and they're clingy. That's an anxious, preoccupied attachment. Someone who generally is anxious, okay, which a good portion of the population is. And that's not really a healthy one. And of course, people that have listened to us know that I deal with some extremes of these too. And then the next one is a dismissive avoidant. These people are independence of priority, uncomfortable with emotional closeness, distance from others, and suppress emotions. Yeah. So people who look real independent don't tend to, seem real independent, and can be a very, look like a very positive characteristic that these people are really independent. They really know how to take care of themselves. Well, it can be good, but it also can indicate that they have a problem with closeness. And they keep a distance from others, which means they've got to do everything themselves. So they may be very good at taking care of themselves and taking care of their business, taking care of their life. And that can be admirable to many people, but they may have a real problem with closeness, and depending on other people, which can cause problems in different areas, obviously. Like it can cause problems in work. It certainly causes problems in relationships, for sure, although it can look attractive to the other person in a relationship. Now, they're really independent. They got it together. Yeah, maybe not so much, depending on how severe the attachment problem is. And then we have the fearful avoidant attachment. High anxiety, and let's see here. High anxiety and high avoidance. So they're anxious, almost like the second one. They're anxious and they're also avoidant at the same time. Yeah. They fear being hurt, difficulty trusting others. Definitely difficulty trusting others. So there are different types, and the last 3 are ones that are not ideal, certainly. It doesn't mean you're going to end up in a therapist's office or on medicine or something like that. Right. But it does mean that life will be a little bit more difficult for you Or you may not know it. It may not be more difficult for you if you're real independent, or you have a dismissive avoidant type that's real independent. It may mean life's easier for you in some ways, but more
Hmm.
difficult in other ways, too. But ideally, we would like people, kids growing up, to have a secure attachment. How does that happen? And to me, it's a real simple thing, but a very hard thing for people to pull off today.
Mm.
Or
Hmm.
there'd be far more people that have a secure attachment in this world, and I can tell you, I certainly did not have one of those, growing up, but to me, it seems very simple now. And that requires have a parent, typically a mother, for early development, 0 through 5, although at 2, boys will move towards their father, etc., things like that. But whoever the primary caretaker is of the infant, if they're reliable in providing the needs to the infant and the young child, eventually you're going to have a secure attachment if they're reliable and know how to have empathy, be present in the right way. And again, it's not about being perfect at all. It's not, but it is about being reliable. They need to provide a safe connection and safety for the child. They need to be attuned to the child's needs generally pretty well, not leave them in extreme discomfort over and over again, and not create extreme discomfort with them by being intrusively needy or overly distant and neglectful, etc. So if you're present in a good way, I often look at the women out there with strollers that are running, and their kids are going to go through heat and cold, but they're like, it's okay, we're fine. It's kind of like it gives me this typical ideal, the fantasy in my head that's a child that can be secure. Like, I'm okay with discomfort. I'm okay. Mom's okay. I'm okay. It's kind of like if the mom's okay, the mom's secure, and the child is like, they don't freak out if something goes wrong and it's just life. Then the child learns that when something goes wrong, it's just life and things will be okay and things are reestablished and made okay. They're safe again. They're okay. Then the child eventually will grow up feeling secure. So there are just some initial thoughts about what a secure attachment looks like. You want to add to that?
Yeah, there's actually a lot to say. I wrote my dissertation on this.
Nice. Did I
I've
know that?
read, yeah, attachment and substance use issues,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's really complicated. So without getting too far into the weeds,
Yeah.
admittedly, um, there are three other things that are worth considering. So one is genetics. There are some people who are built very differently from the jump, where
Amen.
they're just never going to be securely attached. That's one thing. Second thing is infant temperament. So there are basically three types of babies. There's the kind of typical, relatively normal-ish within a spectrum kids. There's the slow to warm up kids, and then there are the fussy kids. And if you're a slow to warm up kid or a fussy temperament kid, there's a lot that your parents can do, but also there's a lot that your parents cannot do. So that's another thing. Um, so that's the second thing. A third thing is that um, depending upon which studies you read, you'll see more of the predictors being on the infant side and more of the predictors of the outcome being on the parent side. So the old 1960s, 70s, 80s stuff you learned is now being overwritten for the last 40-ish years, where it's a little more complicated than just is your parent basically reliable. In fact, if you go back to John Bowlby, the kind of one of the founders of this, if you go
Yep.
back to his very original papers in the 50s
Hmm.
and late 40s, his early thoughts were not that any of these four attachment styles were inherently good or bad. His original thought was that these different ways of operating in the world have different predictable consequences. Not that one was essentially good, bad, or whatever. So he was using approximate, like words. He was using categorical words to the best of his ability to describe something a little more psychodynamically complicated, right? Because what Bowlby was trying to
Right.
do, just so everybody knows, is Bowlby was trying to move away from mainstream like pure psychoanalysis to try to integrate a bunch of other types of sciences to explain early childhood behavior. He was actually trying to do what Freud tried to do with far less data at his disposal. He was trying to take a look at early development and incorporate anthropology and basic behavioral observations that Freud never could do, right? And so he was trying to really get a more comprehensive understanding of why kids develop different types of emotional reactions was his real original goal. And that's why he brought on Mary Ainsworth as an early development child
Right.
psychologist, because she was also interested in the same thing and she did this cross-culturally in Africa and other places. And so the real goal was, can we understand if there are substantial differences, number one? Number two, if those differences correlate in any way, shape, or form to parent behavior or infant behavior? And number three, can we create anything that will change that process? And so, with regard to number one and number two, they succeeded. They figured out that basically speaking, there's some interaction between parents and kids that produces reliable paths. We call these
Right.
attachment styles.
Right.
But these attachment styles are not hard and fast, number one.
Correct. Yeah.
So things can happen after the age of 2 or 5 or 8 that shift things around. That's another thing people need to hear. But a second thing that's important is that if you look at the good data we have, like the large samples and stuff, like you said, like avoidantly attached folks often have little to no impairment, but also it's cultural as well. So if you go to places like Southeast Asia, parts of Korea, China, Japan, avoidantly attached folks actually have better life adjustment, better romantic relationships, better family relationships than what we call securely attached people. So there's also a cultural level to this that's
Right.
important for people to consider because if you come from a very collectivistic culture, then your individual feelings of security are not as relevant to the overall psychological homeostasis of yourself and other people. So there's a lot that can change how you feel and how you're oriented in the world, number one. And number two, like Bowlby never said that your attachment style is destiny. And he never even said that being securely attached is a good thing. He was just trying to describe what looked like a consistent and reliable relationship. That's all he was trying to do. He had no real aspirations for mental health per se. Now, researchers in the 80s and 90s started to take these concepts
Right.
and make them about mental health. And they created some cool studies that say, like my dissertation, like, insecure attachment correlates to substance use, but it's kind of like saying the sky is blue. It's like, yeah, if you have a harder time trusting people, of course you're going to cope maladaptively. So, like, my dissertation didn't actually really do anything productive, quite sincerely. So, it's really a question of like, is this difficulty in relationship significant? Number one. And number two, is it just about attachment or is it about a variety of things? Is the other thing I would
Absolutely.
toss in there.
Right. Right. The complexity of human beings. Right. And what
Correct,
makes
because we
someone who they
are.
are. Well, like
Yeah.
temperament, I go back to temperament for our audience just as an example. Some kids are just born that they're easygoing.
Yeah.
They're just easygoing. So you
Yeah.
can put a kid like that in a lot of conflict situations and they'll roll through it.
Yeah.
And the impact on them may be much less than someone who is very insecure and clingy and they're going to be heightened by conflict. They're going to be more anxious because of it.
Yep.
So some people are blessed with an easygoing temperament, although they may not quite be as driven. They could be driven to success, to work hard, things like that. But you're right. There's personality styles, there's temperament, even like the kid that's hard to warm up. Well, if you're a parent, you've got to have more patience with a kid that's hard to warm up. You have to invest more, and then they'll warm up. And if you don't do the investment and you think they should be responding more quickly, you're going to have a
Hmm.
problem. They're going to have
You're
a
gonna get
problem.
frustrated with that kid, and that kid's gonna
Yeah,
be like,
yeah,
"Why? I didn't do anything wrong, right?"
right. And
Yeah.
they didn't. They're just one of those kids that's hard to warm up. So it takes more involvement, good involvement for them to warm up.
Yeah.
As an example. So that's again, I have this tendency to focus on who's in charge of a child, and that's the parent. So the parent, to me, is going to take on the responsibility. So they need to know their child. They need to know and be equipped to deal with who their child. I use another example is colic. If you have a baby and they have colic, and I know there's a lot more formulas now and things like that for colic that help reduce that dramatically.
Yeah.
But my God, you need the patience of a saint to deal with a kid who has colic. It's kind of like, brother-in-law, your uncle, and you have an autistic child like David.
Yeah.
And the patience it took, and Phil had tremendous patience with David, who was severely autistic, and would take him out in the middle of the night and drive around, or go back to the pool and let him swim,
Sure.
because he just couldn't sleep, which meant my sister, your Aunt Pam, and Phil, they were up every night for a decade and a half because David just couldn't sleep.
Sure.
And so the incredible emotional resources that are needed to deal with a child like that is the extreme example of what we're talking about. But even a colicky child for a number of months is really a challenge.
Sure.
And a lot of parents are not equipped for the challenge because of what's going on in their life. They could have illness, they could have some deep emotional problems of their own that make it very difficult to respond well to a colicky child. There's all kinds of combination of factors. I tell people it's like a 3D cube. The amount of factors, we could list them and go over 100 easy in what makes a person become who they are. And there's so many different factors, and that's why people like me, people like you, we just watch and listen to see all the complexities of people in front of us, so we're better able to connect with them and help them deal with the things that they've got to deal with.
Yeah.
So I always say, and I don't think this will ever change, the most difficult job in the world, other than president, because they all age like 2 or 3 times as fast as normal, other than president, is a mother. It takes tremendous skill and energy to be a mom. I believe it's the most difficult job in the world. I believe my job, seeing people for 45 minutes, having good relationship with them to help them grow and change, is nothing compared to a mother who's on call 24/7 for years.
Sure, especially in the first couple of years. Yeah, that's nuts.
That's why moms of infants and very young children, that's why they look like they're kind of like the Walking Dead sometimes. They're kind of flat affect, because they're just so exhausted. And they're chronically exhausted. It's like when dad comes home and they go, "Here, you take the baby. Don't talk to me for 45 minutes or an hour. I'm going to sit in the bathtub and leave me alone." Or they say, "Here, you take the baby, you take the kids. I'm going to go out and have a cup of coffee with a friend of mine or go shopping." And they need that to survive so they don't kill their child. I mean, metaphorically, but, so they can cope because they are drained. It takes so much investment to raise young children.
Sure.
And by the way, this is an aside, but that's been devalued. Yet that's the toughest job in the world. And that's been devalued for decades, being a mom, which to me is a disservice. Women need to be proud of being moms. They need a lot of acknowledgement and admiration for being a mom. I don't think I could do it. And anyway, quite a job to be a good mom. Quite a job.
I think being a parent is a very difficult thing to do. It's important for various reasons, and it's the security thing you're discussing is, on the one hand, a lot of people have been talking about it for the last 20 years. On the other hand, people are missing, I think, the point. They're missing the idea that you can do more in some cases, and then in other cases, at least this is my take, is that the people who choose to believe inaccurate things about their kid are actually doing more harm than the people who choose to be in acceptance about who their kid is. So to go back to the statement you made about being a colicky baby, this is precisely why I beat the drum of, like, there's also research that says that infant temperament predicts attachment style, not parent behaviors. Because when parents, I think, delusionally believe that I have to do everything under the sun to make this kid secure or something in that ballpark, what that is that's not accepting reality. Because if you have a kid that has that fussy temperament, you can be the most patient person on the planet. And I hate to break it to you, but that fussy temperament baby is outside of your control. And so if you continue to believe that I'm just going to rock the baby, I'm just going to soothe the baby, I'm just going to sing to the baby, and it's going to get better in a month, in 3 months, or whatever expectation you have, you are now putting yourself in a terrible position. And you're also putting that kid in a terrible position because that kid doesn't have the
I
capacity to be soothed.
Oh, I agree, son. I think you're really talking about an anxious attachment then. If a mother's trying too hard to make them someone they're not, versus accepting that their personality may be fuzzy, maybe one of
Or
those
whatever.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
whatever it is, or if they're easygoing, they want it more intense.
Yeah, whatever.
It's gonna create. That's gonna be a bad attachment to me.
Yeah,
But
it's
and even though by measures of success, some types of attachment may lead to great success in many ways. If you have a secure attachment, you're much better equipped to deal with fear, much better equipped to have good relationship than if you have another type of attachment. But I'm with you. Accept your kid for who they are, and say if you got a fussy kid, then don't try and make them a not fussy kid. Just deal with the fact they're a fussy kid in a healthy way, and
yeah.
don't get all freaked out about it because you get freaked out about it. That's creating a problem
And you're going
for
to try and
both. For
control the
both.
kid or whatever it is. Like I was talking with some of my therapist buddies in a podcast a couple of days ago. I think it was Sunday or something. And we're talking about this might seem like a tangent, but I think it relates, which is we're talking about this problem, which is I think people want everyone to be the same to some degree. Like everyone should think like me or have a similar personality as myself or have similar beliefs as myself. And in our conversation, even though many of them are very conservative, was actually we need a diversity of different types of people because if you look
We
at like
do.
if you look at the research on like monkeys, for instance, there's this really interesting finding across most more sophisticated cultures of monkeys. And yeah, there's like a hierarchy and all this stuff, but then
Right.
there's also the outlier types. So I just want to give a quick shout out to the outlier types for parents who are just having kids. You know, in monkey troops and baboons, capuchins, and all these marmosets, all of them, there's always one or two that is like the outlier type who's like a little antisocial or narcissistic or whatever. And this is the person who doesn't sleep in the trees at night and just rest peacefully. Most of them get the privilege and the luxury of sleeping in the trees. But the one that's down on the ground, that's a little antisocial, murderous, or whatever, is down there patrolling to see the next time the jaguar walks by or another troop walks by or whatever it is. And it's like, although you don't want to deal with that person because that person is kind of a mess during the day, at night, that person is going to save your life. Literally.
May do
Literally.
that. Right. Right.
And like, so parents who are like, I want my kid to be normal. I want my kid to be happy. I want my kid to be social. I want my whatever you want your kid to be. Let me just explain it to you that like that's a you thing. And nature has already figured out that we need different types of personalities. Your kid might be messy. In fact, your kid might be so fussy that you want to get rid of them. And fair enough. However, this is just my opinion. You know, take it for what it's worth. But I don't know that I want your kid to be quote unquote normal per se. If they really are an outlier in some way, shape, or form, I want them to be, how would you describe it? I want them to be like, I want them to be, I want them to be more interested in whatever actually works for them, if that makes sense. It's like, if they're the kind that can be distractible, that might be useful. That might be great. They might be great at something, you know? But if they're not that kind and they're not good at that, don't try to make them that. You know, not every kid's going to be a computer programmer. Not every kid's going to be super pro-social. Not
Oh
every
no,
kid's going to
no.
be super, you know,
Do we need obsessive people? Oh yeah.
absolutely.
They make great accountants.
They make phenomenal
and,
accountants
and we need,
and
and they're,
managers and all these things.
yeah. Yeah, and what you made me think of the strong-willed child. By the way, we should touch on the strong-willed child. People
100%.
people try and control a strong-willed child and really screw things up badly.
You
You know,
bet.
what you need to do with a strong-willed child is use that for them and give them responsibility.
Mm.
Help them become leaders and use that strong will to do something really positive with it instead of trying to control them.
And
Channel them.
this is why this conversation about attachment security is important because parents who want their kid to just be nice and kind and sweet and they love me, my kids love me, or whatever. Like that is all a fantasy. That's mostly about the parent and not actually about the well-being of the kid.
Oh man, I have a great example for you. There's a guy watching a podcast. I won't say his name today, but he is aggressive. I believe at
Mm.
times mean,
Sure,
but he's brilliant.
sure.
They do 5 hours live a day,
Wow.
and they're entertaining as can be. And it's a great distraction for me to get off the serious stuff because a lot of times,
Sure,
they're not serious.
sure, sure.
But he picks on people. He's hurt people physically, doing
Wow.
things that most people would not do. You know what I'm saying? And there's aspects to him that are like, did this guy experience some trauma
Probably,
growing up? Yeah, but
probably.
he's really brilliant
Yeah.
at what he does in so many ways. So he's one that you're not going to change him. His wife even warned him one time. I'm not afraid for them. I'm afraid for them, not you. I'm afraid you'll hurt
Mm.
somebody. And he went out and hurt somebody
Mm.
significantly. You know what I'm saying? She's warning him, and he just can't. He can't see it sometimes,
Yeah.
But again, there's so much of a leader in him, a guy that will speak truth to people that other people would not speak up and say. There's so many good things to him, that he's really interesting to watch. Yet he'll grind you into the ground, go after you, and just keep going after you and after you and after you.
Yeah.
Which I find very unattractive. But again, he has so many good things to his person. He's a great example of what you're talking about. Don't try and make him someone else. Now,
Yep.
do you have to stand up to him at times? Yeah, because he can
Yeah.
still go too far.
Yeah.
But he's got a great personality to do what he's doing.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
think
enjoyable.
that's the thing is like we can talk about secure attachment, but people have a stereotype in their head of what that means. Number one,
They do.
my kid,
They
my
do.
kid is sweet. My kid is responsible. My kid doesn't have strong feelings. My kid always comes back to me when there's a problem. It's like, no, that's just. And so I think it's a question of are we shooting for an attachment style or are we shooting for quality of a relationship between two people? Right? And I think I care far less about the style of attachment a person has and more about their general interest and capacity to have a quality of relationship that's useful for the experience they're
Right.
having.
Right.
You know?
Well, and it needs to be for both people,
Of
certainly. So they
course.
may have to work on some edges they got in their personality,
Yes.
and stuff. And like no one is gonna typically intimidate me. Just not really easy to do.
Yeah.
And I like that quality, but I also don't want to be intimidating to people.
Mm.
But I speak truth a lot. My mentors always appreciated me because I was very just honest. Well, this is the way I think. This is what I did. It may not be the best, but I'll just say it. And they always admired the authenticity in me, I think.
Hmm.
One of my greatest mentors, a psychoanalyst, Nathan Simon, who I trained under supervision for a lot of years, and I always respected him. Except when I was new in training, he told me to be quiet. You don't know anything, be quiet and listen. But once you got past that and got trained, he was very respectful, of what my views about things, and I really value that because I just say what I think. I say
Yeah.
what I believe, and I find that very attractive, and I think people are attracted to it. It's like if I make a mistake, I remember dealing with a professional recently, and she said to me, "Don't worry, I won't tell anybody that you didn't write down the dates and times of a meeting that come up." And I go, I don't care who knows that I didn't write them down. I told you guys in the meeting that I'm tired and I'm not going to write them down. And she was trying to collude with me as if she'll hide my imperfection from me. It's like, I don't care. Yeah, I didn't write them down. I just need the dates and the times, the meetings.
It's very strange.
I know it real well. Trust me, it is. And I won't go on about that, but trust me, I have a real problem with people like that. But in situations like that situation, it's just like, be honest. I don't care if I made a mistake. I made a mistake. It's not about me. If I made a mistake, let's just correct the mistake and go on.
Yeah.
Let's own it. And that's who I am, and I don't want to change any of that. And that kind of honesty and stuff and integrity. I believe in those things greatly, and that's something that I think generally Lockwoods have a lot of. Mm-hmm. And I find that a very attractive quality in other people that can just own what they've done or haven't done, or and just try and make the best out of it they can and go on.
Yeah.
It's not about your ego, self-worth. Just deal with it and go on.
Yeah.
Get better at it. Try more, harder, or whatever the case may be, And let's just let the truth reign and let's deal with it and move on. Not try and hide. Anyway, so I agree with you. I remember when we talked about this in one of the first podcasts, and just more of a less time. We had much less time to talk about it. That intrigued me when you said, let people be who they are. If they're fussy, they're going to be fussy, and you're going to deal with a fussy person. Don't try and make them a calm person. I mean, a person that's always going. Yeah, they're not going to be. And if you got a kid that is just easygoing, God bless you. They're easygoing. You have one less kid to deal with. You may have some kids that are more strong-willed. It'll take a lot more energy to deal with. That you got to join in a really particular kind of way to help them become the leaders they're capable of becoming.
Right.
So just know who you got there. That little ball in front of you when they're an infant, as they get older and grow up, know who you got and help them become who they are, not who you want them to be.
Yes.
That's a key to good attachment. It's not about you. It's about who they are and what they need for them to grow up and be able to function and move around in this world. And like you said, this is kind of to wrap it up, attachments can change, even in adults. Yes. And so if you got issues with attachment, it's all right to try and change. You could change and feel more secure, just by how you look at things and deal with things. What you understand could help you become more secure. And again, generally, I believe the more secure you feel, the easier life is for you. You're not going to you're more resistant to all this fear going on in society, all these things going on. You're more resistant. But one of the things that parents do, there's a commentary too. I forgot about this earlier. One of the jobs of a parent is protect children from fear. In other words, they're not going to share their conflicts in front of their kids. They're not going to share about the news in front of their kids when something bad's going on. They literally protect kids so the kids can have an environment that is positive, so that as they grow up, they can expect a positive environment. And these are people that are more resilient than the fear, because they're not going to focus on the bad things. They're going to focus on the good, because the parents did a good job of protecting them from needless conflict and fear. Right. They don't talk about the news in front of them. They don't put the news on that's talking about all these horrible things and grinding fear into people in front of their kids.
Right.
They won't do that. They protect them from that. And then as adults, guess what, guys? We need to protect ourselves from being inundated with social media and fear, so that we can feel more secure, relax, enjoy your life. You're more productive because of it, and you have better relationships because of it. So that's just a commercial for be your own good parent. Take care of yourself. And if you really have a problem with attachment, and you really have a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and again, you can't change it by doing the normal things people do, talking to people, reading, listening to people like us, go get some help. It can change. You can feel better and therefore function better. And that's always going to be our message.
Yeah.
And that's it for today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Encouragement for Living Life. We hope you were encouraged by today's discussion. If you have a question, you can email us at lockwoodwithlockwood@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer it on one of our shows. Hope to see you next time.